Ukraine's President Zelensky has addressed the Ukrainian people, saying he will not betray his country's national interest. He was careful not to publicly criticize the peace deal drawn up by the United States, saying he will work quickly and constructively with the US, but added he will propose an alternative to the White House plan. Earlier, he held a call with the Vice President J.D. Vance. He has also had calls with various European leaders through the course of today. Well, the draft plan emerged after meetings between the US and Russia and appears to reflect many of Moscow's key demands. Let's hear some of what President Zelensky has been saying.
Українці, українки.
Ukrainians, every nation has a moment in its life when there is a need to talk, honestly, calmly, without any assumptions, gossips, without anything irrelevant. As it is, as I always try to speak to you, there is one of the most difficult moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine now is one of the biggest. Now Ukraine may face a very difficult choice, either to lose its dignity or its key partner. Either difficult 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the most difficult, and the further risks. Life without freedom, dignity, and without justice, and forced to trust someone who attacked us twice. They will be waiting for an answer from us, although I have already given it on the 20th of May of the 2019, when I gave oath to Ukraine. I said, I, Volodymyr Zelensky, chosen by the will of Ukrainian people as a president of Ukraine, am obliged to defend the sovereignty and independence of Ukraine.
Well, let's speak to BBC Monitoring's Russia editor Vitaly Shevchenko. And Vitaly, it was really interesting the way President Zelensky laid it out. No direct criticism, but clear he's going to come up with alternative proposals alongside the Europeans. Tell me more about what he said, because it was crucial, that line, he won't betray Ukraine and the national interest, but was quite clear that he knew that there would be a lot of political pressure coming in the next few days.
What he said reflects the impossible position that he is in. On the one hand, he suggested that accepting this 28-point plan presented by the Americans would amount to Ukraine, and I quote, losing its dignity. And on the other hand, he said the alternatives are no less unappealing, including losing America as Ukraine's key ally, key partner, than facing Russia's continued onslaught through a winter that Zelensky described as the most difficult yet. So, okay, he vowed to work round the clock to make sure that whatever peace plans are approved, they include provisions for what he called Ukraine's dignity, independence, and freedom. But how exactly he's going to achieve that is less clear, yes, frankly, given Russia's continued military attacks and Americans' really, really heavy pressure that is being piled on the Ukrainian leader. For that, to cope with all that, Zelensky needs support from Europeans. And frankly, Matthew, that gives me a sense of déjà vu. This is, well, more or less what we saw back in August after that summit between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, when Europeans rushed to Volodymyr Zelensky's aid, assistance. So he had several phone calls today. He had a joint conference with the leaders of France, Britain and Germany. So looking at what he said, I get a sense of urgency. He looked, yes, shaken, I thought.
In terms of that 28-point plan, which are the bits that give Kyiv the most alarm?
The most alarming bit is, of course, withdrawing from parts of Ukraine that Russia doesn't control yet, cutting the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, pledging not to join foreign military alliances such as NATO. That, of course, doesn't seem fair to Ukrainians who have been defending their country. And also, what about people living in those places that the Americans apparently want Ukraine to vacate? And also, Withdrawing from Donbass would mean abandoning control of the so-called fortress belt in eastern Ukraine, which has been stopping Russia from advancing further west. So that would leave Ukraine exposed to further Russian attacks.
Vitaly, thanks very much. Well, Vitaly, referring to those European calls, let's turn to some of the European reaction we've already had, because here's Lithuania's president speaking just a short while ago.
We are talking about a possible or potential reduction of Ukrainian armed forces, territorial concessions, and some other decisions which would, of course, mean actual capitulation of Ukraine. And we should use this momentum to express very strong will and strong opinion of European, first of all, European community, that we should find the formula which preserves Ukrainian territorial integrity.
Well, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer held a call with President Zelensky, as Vitaly was telling us, along with Chancellor Merz of Germany and President Macron of France, and said Ukraine must determine its own future. They're working on counter-proposals to that US plan, according to the Reuters news agency.
Well, I've just had a call with President Zelensky alongside President Macron and Chancellor Merz, and that was an opportunity for us to express again our support for Ukraine and the principle that's very important, which is all matters to do with Ukraine must be determined ultimately by Ukraine. Now, we all want a just and lasting peace. That's what the President of America wants. That's what we all want. And so we need to work from where we are to that end. But the principle that Ukraine must determine its future under its sovereignty is a fundamental principle.
And how do you feel when you read the proposals? What was your feeling about it?
Well, it reinforced in me that basic principle that we have to work from where we are to the just and lasting peace. I know that's what President Trump wants, and he's been working to that end, but we must reiterate the principle that matters about Ukraine must be determined by Ukraine.